Massive NFL pod for you today. Mike Sando, we're going to run through Detroit's win, some of the 5-5-ish, 4-6, 6-4 teams that he actually really likes, a big breakdown of the Caleb Williams problems in Chicago, an alarming number on Jayden Daniels. I've got best win, worst loss, stats to impress the ladies. We're bringing it back, something that may only annoy me, and the Pud Galvin Award. I've got my college football top 12, a recap of a weekend in Baton Rouge. I spent a week in Louisiana, actually, and I'm alive still, so that's good news. And we've got life advice. Week 10, Lions football. Do you know how good you have to be to win a football game in the NFL when your quarterback throws 5 interceptions? That's what Jared Goff did last night in an epic comeback for the Lions against the Houston Texans on the road. All right, let's go through the 5 picks. I may bring this back at the very end of this. I don't know. Working theory, interception points. I don't know if I can be in charge. I don't know if I have that time, but I nominate myself because I trust myself on interception classification. All right, so the 5 picks. The first one's tipped on a throw out to the right. Great play by the defensive player to tip it, to allow it to be live. The second one, he's hit from behind. Another great play by the Texas defense, getting the position, pass rush behind him. The third one's in a Hail Mary before the end of the half. So you could actually say the first 3 weren't like really on him. There's those different interceptions. Don't worry, we'll get to the Jacksonville game. We're like, well, what is that guy doing? With Goff, those are pretty clear. The fourth on the throw to Laporta, off on the throw a little. Maybe Laporta can make a better play on the ball. Also, Lassiter just making a great play on it. And then the 5th pick's probably the worst of the 5, deep shot, but he's got one-on-one with Jameson Williams. So not a great throw, but 5 interceptions by your starting quarterback by 8:18 of the third quarter. It's the first team to win a game throwing 5 or more interceptions since Matt Ryan threw 5 and beat Arizona in 2012. Goff's last pick was on September 22nd. He had gone 5 games without throwing one. He had 4 on the season going into last night's game, and now he has 9. And if you remember, Big Cat and I having our long-term, I guess you could call it the Jared Goff timeline of arguments and all those different moments, I had now moved past it. So at no point was I sitting there last night being like, I should have just held on to my position a little bit longer because I think Goff is terrific now. And I think it was a very weird 5 interception night. And the fact that it happened so quickly, you're still in the game because then he's cleaned the last 18 or the last 18 of the third and then the comeback in the fourth quarter. So the Lions are now 8-1 for the first time since 1954. They've won 7 straight. I think they're the best team in the NFL. And they survived that kind of night. Now, how do they survive that kind of night? Well, Houston, CJ's picks were tough because he doesn't really throw many. That's only his 3rd game of his career with 2 or more. He had 3 in a game last year. They don't have Nico Collins, so they activated him this week. Once he's activated, I'm going to feel even better about Houston. Will Anderson wasn't activated last night. Tunsil's dealing with this ankle thing where he just got back and then he gets rolled up again. So I actually, probably one of the few people sitting here today going, I actually still feel good about Houston despite being shut out in the second half and then not winning the game where the other team throws it away 5 times. But I do. They're 6-4 in the AFC today. They were 6-4 a year ago. They've got Dallas, Tennessee, at Jacksonville, Miami over the next 4. Yes, they have a negative point differential, but they go 3-4 over those next 4. They're 9-6. And maybe it's the Bills win. Maybe it's the Bills win and the fact that they're going up against what I think is the best team in the league and getting up on Detroit like that, that as bad as the Jets game was, I'll judge teams on those moments against the other really good teams in the league, being like, do they look like they can hang with them? And I think they don't have the Tunsil issue. Anderson's playing and Nico's out there. Maybe Houston even pulls this one off. They probably do with Nico Collins. So despite the loss and the historic nature of all of it, with all of those turnovers, let's see how these next 4 games play out for the Texans. Okay. That's probably best win. I don't know that we can top that. I don't know if Kansas City can be eligible for best win, even though it's a last-second field goal block against the Broncos. I don't know what to like. I think my Broncos stance is fairly clear. Like they are one of those decent record teams that I would have zero fear of in a playoff game, but they were terrific defensively yesterday. I don't know what I would have done with the Broncos at 6-4 today. I probably would have still just been like, yeah, okay, interesting win. interesting team. Don't really buy into them. They're the number one defense in the NFL as far as opponents' yards per play. Some will go by scoring defense. So you'll see different teams ranked as the best and the worst. Their scoring D is number 4 behind the Chargers at 1, Pittsburgh at 2, Minnesota at 3. So Denver lines up for a 35-yard field goal. And in that spot, like that's a no-brainer. If you look back at teams lining up out 35 yards, they're going to make that field goal like 94% of the time. So Leo Chanel, who has the block on the game-winning field goal attempt, actually was talking about this after the game, saying, we're playing defense. Denver's getting into field goal range. They're up 2, so you're starting to think, is this one of those spots where you want to just let them score? Spags, the defensive coordinator, was like, absolutely not. Chanel had told Albert Breer at SI.com, you can read it this morning, where he was like, the 2 previous kicks in the game, I'd won my matchup. So I really like my chance going after it. He goes after it. He blocks it. The Chiefs stay undefeated. And I don't think we should start. Now, look, it's good TV. It's good radio and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be doing a little bit of it here. But like the likelihood of the Chiefs. And look, we have hours to fill. Okay. So if somebody in a producer in a pre-show meeting saying, do we do the likelihood of the Chiefs going undefeated and being 17-0? Like you go, that's probably not going to happen, especially the way they're playing. Like point differential, they're behind a bunch of teams for a team to have this kind of record. Maybe it's the Mahomes, Mariano Rivera factor where it's just a little bit different. And you can't look at point differential, which would be entirely fair. But when I look at the Chiefs and their schedule, they're going to Buffalo. They opened as a 1-point favorite. They're now getting 2.5 points. They're a dog, and they still have 5 games left against projected playoff teams. So I don't think they're going. It'd be one thing if they were just smoking most of these teams, but it feels like these moments where they regress, overtime with Tampa, this Denver game where they're struggling against, again, a really good defense, one of the best defenses in the league. It's just, and dude, during the playoffs, I'm probably still going to pick them, even if it stays like this. And I'd imagine there's a couple losses waiting for them. I still feel good about the San Francisco 49ers. I know you already knew that. And I thought yesterday encapsulated a lot of thoughts on why I like them when things are cooking. They're 5-4. They're projected out of the playoffs as of this morning, an 8th seed in the NFC. And they actually have the 4th toughest remaining strength of schedule. But if you look at that game, and there's a big reason why it ended up being close, and that's the field goal kicking from Moody. But the Niners outgained Tampa 413 to 215. They're 5 of 11 on third down. McCaffrey's first game back, he had 19 touches. He didn't run it great, 13 for 39, but the element's there. You have the Kittle deep shot. That was hilarious because there was a defensive back for Tampa. I think it was 32. It was like, I don't want to deal with this. And he just tries to peel off from the thing, or he just kind of takes himself out of the play, and he still ends up getting mauled, and it made it even worse. The Kittle touchdown. Can we talk about Purdy's hips? I'd like to. That throw by Purdy being flushed out and then having to throw it going right to left. Watch how he resets himself and gets his hips and everything. Like it's I don't know if the Elite 11 guys are going to be running that over and over again in the hallways of the facility, but it's the kind of stuff you're like, that's some of those little things there. Because I think, we're going to spend probably 10 years of Purdy's career being like, is he elite? Is he not elite? Like it's just going to happen. But that's the kind of throw in that spot and the pressure that he was under to get himself steadied and make that kind of throw. I think that's some of those little things that all of us could do a better job of picking up on. So, yeah, the concerning part of the Niners story here is Moody misses 3 field goal attempts. The fact that they had to take 6 isn't exactly great. But late in the game when they needed it, they had 2 3-and-outs against Tampa, who, look, Baker's out there battling as much as he possibly can. They're without the wide receivers. They're trying to makeshift this offensively, and they're actually hanging in some of these games against now back-to-back weeks with really good opponents here. And they even got a field goal late there. So I just thought there were some things in the second half, maybe in that fourth quarter string of possessions there, where when San Francisco got the 2 3-and-outs, I was like, all right, this is what it's supposed to look like. Debo, though, we could add to the list of concerns. He's just not running the football the same. Right now, he's 3 yards per carry in 8 games. For his career, he was 5.8. He was 6.8 last year. And it's not like he's going to get a million carries, but it's just such a devastating thing to prepare for. And there was one run in particular against the Bucs where he ran it kind of like into everybody. I think he got stuffed for a loss, and it looked like he was just having a hard time even getting up. So it may be lingering stuff. I don't know if it's his frustration, because then we saw his frustration boil over a little bit later, where he went at his long snapper and then sort of swiped Moody, the kicker. Should you slap the long slapper, long slapper, I will leave that in. Should you go at the long snapper, then kind of slap your kicker? Never played, so I don't know. I don't know if that's I can tell you this, if they lost that game, you're seeing that video a lot more. That video would mean a lot more. It would mean all sorts of different things. It's probably not great. It's probably not what you're looking for. But the entire package of the Niners, despite some of those negative things, I think there's a lot to like about what I saw there. And again, we know what history is too. Pre-bye with Shanahan, they're 25-37, winning 40% of their games. Post-bye, 44-18 under Shanahan, 71% clip. Worst loss, it's the Bears. At home, 19-3 to the Pats. 142 yards of offense. Surprised it was that high. They were 1 of 14 on third down. Caleb Williams was sacked 9 times. Again, the Pats. Caleb's been sacked 38 times, most in the NFL. He could also get rid of the ball sometimes. This is not optimal. It's so bad in Chicago. These were back-to-back questions to head coach Matt Eberflus after the game.
How do you defend your work as head coach when it looks this bad?
Well, I would just say that. I would just go back to we had the men in the room, and we have evidence on tape of doing it.
Are you willing to be fired without ever exploring the possibility that the offense could be better with better offensive game planning and play calling by changing the coordinator?
Yeah, like I said, we'll look at everything.
Second question's great. Are you willing to be fired? If, whatever. The men in the room answer, I don't know. What's he supposed to say, right? Like, I'd fire me. I just can't imagine that they're going to run this back. I cannot imagine that they're going to run this back and have a quarterback you spent the first overall pick on play in this kind of setup. And it may not be the O-line you want, but there's guys out there that can catch the footballs, and they're never open. Okay, a couple other things. I'm not done. Not done yet. Toughest remaining strength of schedule, the Bears. It's not even close. I mean, this is such a tough schedule the rest of the way. Remaining winning percentage of the combined opponents, 708. Cleveland has the second toughest, and it's 587. Again, Chicago, 708. All right? And we could start going like back retroactively auditing some of the Bears wins, going, Tennessee kind of gave that one away. Jacksonville was terrible. What about this? Although they should have won the Washington game. I'm not done. I'm bringing it back.
Stats to impress people.
We used to call it stats to impress the ladies. We have updated things here. All right. So remember when I talked about the Browns historically and how, like, where they were at, how bad they were on third down? I'd gone through it. You're watching games like they never convert any third downs. Let's see how bad it is. And it was terrible. They were sub 20%. Okay. And then I try to find somewhere like, how does that match up historically with other stuff? All right. Well, I looked through 20 years of teams' results. Had anyone ever finished sub 20%? Well, I got sick of looking it up. I couldn't find anyone that had a number that was even close to as bad as the Browns. Usually the teams that were last were like 31% conversion rate on third down. There was a couple that were even worse than that, like 25%, but that was pretty rare to be in the 20s, and the Browns were under 20%. Well, the good news for the Browns is it's gotten better. Why am I talking about this? Because the Browns are still the worst, but they're tied with another team for worst third down conversion rate in the NFL. And after the showing yesterday, the Bears have caught the Browns, both at like 28.7 on third down conversions. This may only annoy me. Mac Jones kind of annoys me. I think it was just a lot of the stuff where with New England, he was carrying himself a little bit like a dude who'd had some non-alternate Pro Bowl nominations. But look, he gets the first start. Trevor Lawrence is out in that Jags-Vikings game yesterday. Trevor Lawrence got the shoulder issue, which some people are hoping is like a real injury to explain some of this stuff. So Mac runs it in on 3rd and 1, and he celebrates, man. And I'm sorry. I just watched it. I was like, man, this guy's feeling himself. And to be fair, if we want to do the Mac Jones side of the argument, the guy's career looked like it's over. named a backup, gets a chance to start, gets to run in the end zone. Probably feels pretty good. So who am I? Who am I to do a slight eye roll at the celebration? I'm admitting I'm wrong on that. But the reason I give you the eye roll is that it was the only touchdown, and the interceptions at the end of the game. You're like, what are you seeing? And on top of that, why are you putting your team at risk that's still in this game because of these two possessions, because of when you're throwing the interceptions? So Minnesota finds a way to go up in this game finally, because there would have been a different Minnesota conversation today if they had dropped another one. They're down 12-7. It's 2nd and 8. Mac Jones throws a pick on 2nd and 8. It's a bad pick. Defense forces a punt. They get it back. They start moving the ball a little bit. It's 1st and 10 at the Minnesota 43. He throws another pick, and it's awful. And it's also 1st down. Okay? You want to throw one on 3rd? You want to throw one on 4th? I'm here for it. It's why I think I need to come up with a system where it's interception point totals, right? So the lower the interception point total, the better your interceptions are. Like Jared Goff's Hail Mary attempt at the end of the first half. That's a point. Okay? Shouldn't even count, really. Maybe like half sacks. We call them half interceptions. But let's stay with the point system. Number 2 is maybe the Laporta interception. Yeah, something else could have happened. Not the best throw you've ever seen, but that's like a real pick. And then there should be a 3-pointer for like the Mac Jones interception on 1st and 10, the 43, down 5 points, moving the football, enough time to at least, like, you can throw a couple incompletions and then see what happens. Maybe like the Jameis, if Marlon Humphrey had caught that one in their win against the Ravens, that'd be a 3-pointer. And at the end of the year, if you have a ton of interception points, it means your interceptions are worse. I don't know that I have the time to go through all of them, but it wouldn't be that hard to do, actually. All right, final thing here. It's the Pud Galvin Award. We couldn't call it the Cy Young Award because that is taken. It's Pud Galvin, and Daniel Jones wins it. Because baseball is changing, kids. Baseball has changed, and Cy Young has the all-time MLB record for most complete games, 749 complete games pitched. Pud Galvin, though, you may not have known this. Ask your granddad. 646 complete games, right? So we know that there's not a lot of complete gamers anymore. Justin Verlander's the active leader. He's 620 shy of Pud Galvin. He has 26, but you're like, Verlander's old. Garrett Cole, younger, new generation. He has 8 complete games to his record. Now you're like, what is going on? What's Russillo doing? Well, here's what I'm doing. I don't think we're ever going to see somebody else like Daniel Jones get 70-plus starts in a career. I mean, this is the longest bad relationship your buddy's ever been in. And I'll admit, the best part about it is there was a couple peaks there at times of like, could this potentially work out? You know, could he just manage the game for a bit? There's even a couple times this year I was like, man, it looks like he's throwing the football all right. But let's not fall in love with just the throws. Much like the complete game number in baseball, I don't know, with the speed with which things move at that position, I don't know if we're ever going to have another Daniel Jones. Okay, time again for my college football top 12. It's just my top 12, remember. And then if I have to, maybe I'll do it at the end of the year prior to the committee's last bracket. I'll just go, this is what my bracket would be. So there you go. That's fine, because there's a lot of different stuff here. Oregon, some of these will be quick. Some of them will not be quick. Oregon's number 1, obvious reasons. Ohio State at number 2 in this poll, right? Not doing the bracket here. And to add confusion to this, when you start projecting out, like, okay, where are the extra games going to be? How could the conference championship games play out? Like, Ohio State technically right now would not be in the conference championship game. It'd be Oregon and Indiana, but the Indiana-Ohio State result will take care of that. Just a quick note here on Ohio State's defense. They've allowed 18 or more points just once this season. That was the Oregon game. They've had 6 games between 7 and 0 points allowed. Texas at number 3. I flirted. It is crazy how you can get to like 10 games into the season and you're still kind of wondering, well, do you have a win that justifies this? Or are we just kind of defaulting back to our preconceived notions about what a team could be? because you could get into it with the Ohio State stuff. The Ohio State win against Penn State, in theory, is better than anything that Texas has done. But Texas putting up 49-17 against Florida. You can make fun of Florida all you want. If you've watched them the last few weeks, there's definitely a little bit more, despite the fact that they're on this third walk-on quarterback. But Ewers finally look like Ewers. 5 touchdowns. You could argue it's the best game he's had all season. It's at least the best game he's had in over a month. But to that Texas point of, it's very easy. Like here's something I think is kind of like our fault. And then it can happen to me and I'll be like, well, that's not really what'll happen. But if you listen to somebody talk and then you go, I want to put it together, right? The excerpt that comes out, it can look like it can just sit differently. And it also hits differently, right? The words in front of you, as opposed to the tone, right? Is there a smile on the person's face? Is the person angry when they're on television? So that's another visual layer, right? Where when we have more components, we can understand the point the person was trying to make a little bit more, as opposed to like, let me just now go ahead and put this in text form, and then it looks a little bit different. The college football version of that is just to be the guy sitting there and being like, man, do we even know that they're good though, dude? Do we even know that they're like, really? Have they actually beaten anybody? Like, that's the easiest thing to do, to just dismantle any of those things. At some point, you just have to sit down and go, this is what I've watched this year, and this is who I think is good. This is who I think is bad. And you're still going to be wrong about a ton of that stuff, but to just be constantly the guy in the corner and like, sure, dude, are you sure? And Texas definitely falls into that category. But what I'd ask is the dude who's saying, are you sure about Texas's wins? Do you like Penn State and Indiana's wins? Because we can do that too. Are you saying, because what I can't have from an Indiana fan right now is you not liking Texas's resume. Can't do it. I'm sorry. Penn State's at 4. I'm not sure why. Their best wins, let's compare them to Tennessee, who I have 5. Tennessee has 3 ranked wins. I'm doing that in quotes. They beat NC State and Oklahoma, and they also beat Bama, which is a really good win, believe it or not. If they beat Georgia this week, is number 3, is number 2 in play for Tennessee? Maybe. At least number 3, I would think. So if you're going through Tennessee's wins, right? Does Penn State have a win? What's Penn State's win? Is 4-5 USC a better win than 5-5 Oklahoma? I actually think it is, at least for that day. But Tennessee was dominant, and Penn State needed to kick a field goal. So maybe I'm actually wrong. And Tennessee's Oklahoma, because we could just beat up on those records of those teams. But I think at that time, I probably liked USC better than I liked Oklahoma going into that game. And then Penn State's lost. The reason they're 4 and higher in the polls than Tennessee, at least for me on this one, because let me double check and take a look at the polls, because I think this is split between the coaches and the AP. It is. Penn State's 4 in the AP, 6 for Tennessee. Tennessee's 4th in the coaches poll. Coaches poll did a couple wild things today, but yeah, I have Tennessee probably because their loss is worse to Arkansas. The backup quarterback into that game for Arkansas as well. So it's kind of the best loss is Penn State's over Ohio State. So yeah, I had a really hard time with it. As I'm explaining it again, I'm having a hard time with it again. It's a coin toss. I would not get into a fist fight in a parking lot over this one. All right, number 6, Indiana. First place in the Big Ten, obviously, off this week before the Ohio State game. 10-win season for the first time in 126 years. BYU, I've got them 7. So I actually matched the AP through the first 7, down 21-10 at the half against a Utah team you figured that's had a disastrous season for them based on expectations. They would get up for this one because of the rivalry. It's the second game I believe BYU's won in the last 10 seconds of a game. Their wins are better than Indiana. I think I just feel like Indiana's a little bit better than BYU. All right, this is where it changes. Notre Dame's 8th in the AP. Bama is 9th. I have Bama 8th. So that first drive against LSU, yes, I was in the building. This was an absolute ass kicking. And they got everything going to the perimeter early. It kind of neutralizes the pass rush, makes the defense think about things more and more. And then it also eliminated Milroe really needing to process a ton of stuff. And here's he threw it. He completed 12 times, 12 passes, 12, 18, right? But he ran it for 185 yards and had 1 million touchdowns. So that's pretty good. The point is that if you were an LSU guy going in, you're wondering, hint, if there would be the chance if Milroe had to get into a shootout with Nussmeier, if it would lead to Milroe having the bad Milroe game. Well, instead it was the bad Nussmeier game, which unfortunately he's having some of these mistake-prone games, and Milroe didn't even need to throw the football because they just destroyed them. So that part of it wasn't there wasn't the South Carolina moments, right? There wasn't anything in that game where Milroe was ever going to be put in a spot where it was even that tough for him because I still think he's the best running quarterback in the entire league. All right, let's go to number 9. That is Notre Dame. Notre Dame's 8th in the coaches, or 8th in the AP, 7th in the coaches. I could be accused of not liking them enough, sure. I think he got me. You go common opponent that I saw a lot of people doing after Miami lost to Georgia Tech. You're like, oh, wow, here's a common opponent for this team that was ahead of them the entire time. Well, that's because they didn't have a loss to Northern Illinois. Georgia Tech, the Irish beat them 31-13, but no Haynes King for Georgia Tech. It was the other guy who we did see on Saturday as well. Welcome back, Ole Miss. Number 10 in my poll. 10th in the AP, 11th in the coaches. This was at the start of the game. I'm like, this is pretty bad. They come out first series as Ole Miss. Jackson Dart gets smashed up, throws the pick. Short field, touchdown drive for Georgia, no problem. Then Austin Simmons, the 3-star freshman out of Florida, comes in. He's getting so big, bigger now than when he was listed as a recruit. And they go down the field and tie the game 7-7. If Ole Miss makes it into the playoff, and granted, there could be potential moments that are bigger, but to this point, that drive by Simmons should be seen as the single most important possession in Ole Miss's 24 football season. Okay? Because when that happened, it was one thing if you thought Simmons was going to have to play the rest of the game, but it was an incredible answer to everything looking like it was falling apart. Speaking of falling apart, the Georgia offense continues now. They are 50th in the country on yards per play. Beck, 2 more turnovers. And you can say, well, they scored how many points again? 10, and 7 were gifted to them. I know Ole Miss is invested in the D-line, but that's basically 3 points that were not off of the gift in the very beginning of the game. All right, number 12. I kept him in there, Miami. I thought Miami was always a little fraudulent, but I put him in there because they were undefeated and they were a Power 4 team, whether it was Virginia Tech, whether it was Cal, but then to respond against Duke. But it just kept happening. Okay, it just kept happening. I think they'd be 9-3, 8-4 in the SEC. Their defense is terrible. Think about what Georgia Tech did to them. All right. So Georgia Tech runs it for 271. And by the way, Miami dropped 8 spots in both polls. So they're still on that 12 line as of right now, but in front of Boise State and SMU, which is probably frustrating. I guess I was going to be that guy and have them outside of it, but I still didn't think that was entirely fair. I think 8 spots is enough punishment for them. But the craziest part of how bad their defense is that Haynes King's back starting. He completed 6 passes for 32 yards, 6-6. He gets smashed in the shoulder again. So Aaron Philo, who's played a little bit in reserve of King, obviously, because King was out. And I like King because I think he's a baller. I think he's tough and all those kind of things. He runs around, but I feel like he's always going to get hurt because he has always gotten hurt. But Philo comes in and tries to manage ship a little bit here. So they completed 11 passes. So they were completely one-dimensional, and Miami still couldn't tackle these guys. Their tackling is terrible. The third and forevers that Miami allows to be converted. And so the part that sucks for all of this is Cam Ward, who I was watching because I was in a sports book as this game was going on and monitoring the live Heisman odds. And they went from plus 150 to plus 450 to today they're plus 650. So this game, because his team can't tackle, may have cost him a Heisman, which sucks because, I know he had the fumble at the end of this, but Cam was pretty clean throughout. They didn't really run the football, so it's turned into can Cam Ward save us every single week? And the point of this, it's not an anti-Miami thing, but show me the Michael Irvin Cam again. That's fun. It's just that this team was bailed out most weeks by a guy with this incredible receivers room too, right? We've already talked about Jacoby and Arroyo and then Restrepo being one of my favorite guys. But when I have to start thinking about you as a potential winner of a national championship, it never felt right when I thought about Miami. Mike Sando, the Athletic senior NFL writer, hanging out with us as he does throughout the season from time to time. Good to see you, man. Good morning.
It's a great morning. Deep into the season, lots of fun stuff. Freaking Detroit and Kansas City can't lose if they try. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
That's a good place to start because they both tried yesterday. In the open, went through the history of how rare it is for somebody to throw 5 interceptions and still win a football game. It's been 12 years since it happened. But I like the Goff story in combination with Baker, who I know has the loss, and we'll get to Tampa maybe more in depth a little bit later on, and then Darnold, even though maybe the timing for that isn't great because they're leaking a bit. So here's the point: is that I had done all this work on quarterbacks that basically, if they were told to leave as first rounders from the team that drafted them, a failure essentially, and then gone somewhere else, how rare playoff success was. And prior to Goff last year, you'd gone almost like 20 years without a quarterback switching in that scenario where he'd won a playoff game. Stafford doesn't count because Stafford was somebody the other team desired, right? So that was kind of the way I framed the whole thing. But when I look at Baker and I look at Goff, and I know the timing isn't perfect for Darnold after that Jags game yesterday, but looking like he may actually be a guy now in Minnesota long term. Like, how would you compare, contrast the reclamation of those QBs? Because I do wonder if this is something that's possible after so many years of thinking the second stop usually is probably the second to last stop.
So I would put him in a little bit of different buckets. I feel like Goff showed that if he was in a great environment, he'd be a good quarterback. That's what it was in the Rams. And I think he's in a great environment now where they have the best offensive line in the league, weapons, run game. Now they even have the defense, improving. So I always thought he was good if it was good around him and then couldn't overcome as well because he's limited in his ability to create, right? Some of the other guys who can pull a rabbit out of the hat or whatever maybe don't need it as right around him. That's not Goff. It can look really bad if you put him in a bad situation, I believe. Like, I think if he was on a bad team now, we'd see some bad stuff. But he's on a really good team. He can drive the Ferrari, right? That's Goff to me. Darnold hasn't played, even this year, playing well with Minnesota, hasn't played to that level. Even this year. I mean, they have the number one defense. They're winning with defense. Even when he has had some big plays and done some nice things, if you go back and watch the games, it's not as impressive on a throw-to-throw basis, and they're winning with defense. He hasn't really had to win too many games. A few nice plays here or there. I just don't think he has done it as consistently, but has some talent and has been in an extremely bad situation before. So I don't know that would go to the same heights, right? I think Goff, if it's right around him, he can thread the needle. I think he can be precise enough as a player. And make the throws to really do it well. I don't know if Goff or if Darnold were in that situation in Detroit that it would look as good as it does with Goff. Okay, that's just my impression of him as a player. A little sloppier, probably, just not as sharp and refined to me. Mayfield is interesting because he has a little bit of a different mindset than the others. He's a little bit more of a gunslinger, has a little bit more of an attitude. Probably that moxie word gets thrown around with him. Sometimes that gets overused, but I think he's Captain Moxie. And then what's impressed me about him, even though they've lost 4 in a row, is like he's going down swinging with some somewhat diminishing returns, probably throwing it too much. Not the efficiency is not as amazing, but their defense is falling apart. He's losing receivers. This guy's game. He's going to give you a chance to win or lose every week. He may lose the game, but you got a shot. Like he's going to be a 3 touchdown, 2 interception guy when there's asking him to do too much. But that's better than a 2 touchdown, 4 interception guy, right? And I think there's other players that fall like a Jameis Winston kind of goes over that too far, right? You can rally around Jameis, but he's going to have more mistakes. Right? I feel like Baker, like, dang it, watching him, I'm like, I don't know if we're winning the Super Bowl, but I want to play with this guy. Do you get that feel too?
Yeah, especially the last couple of weeks. I mean, I'm not just focusing on the left arm, stiff arm of Bosa on that play where he keeps that play alive. It was huge. They needed to have it. It still seems scientifically impossible that Bosa couldn't, but you're running and you're kind of like ranging. Is it a penalty if you were to rip a player's arm out?
No, I wondered if the mentality of the game now where you're so worried about doing something, to hurt the quarterback and get a 15-yard penalty, even though Bosa, if he's sitting there at his locker and you're asking him about the rules, would know he knows what they are. But I wonder if in the heat of battle, even sometimes you are like, what can I do here? Because he really should have just ragdoll cartwheeled him, just taken his arm and just thrown him, right? Violently thrown him, which he could do.
Yeah. I mean, I think at some point he was figuring, well, I'll close here. But then as you're watching it, and granted on the replay, it's like, oh, it's totally unfair to say, oh, you should have done this, this, or all these different things. But to your bigger point, that the touchdown drive against Kansas City to get it into overtime, they're down the receivers. You're like, how are they going to do this? There's some real fight in him. And
And I like the job Liam Cohn's done too. If you would have said before the year, if we would have gotten a bunch of 50-year-old coaches in the league, they'd be going, Liam Cohn, what's he ever done? It looks pretty good. I think he's done a nice job too. I think that's been part of it. Finding Kate Otten, right? Finding other ways to do it has helped him too.
So where is Tampa then? Because I think there's this group of teams with records where you're like, well, I can't like you that much. Whereas, I was laughing in the beginning going, if Denver had pulled that game out against Kansas City, they'd be 6-4. They have this terrific defense. And I still would be like, you can have them, where I'm hyping up the Niners. And with these Tampa Bay Buck injuries on the road, and granted, it's because of the field goals probably more than anything, they're even in it with a chance to win the game at the end. Like, I always think there's like, not all 5-5, 6-4, 4-6 teams are created equal. And I think that's the point of the season that we're at.
So I think when they play teams that have good offenses because of where they're at defensively, they're going to win like 40% or 35%. And we can see that these last few weeks. They've lost to the 49ers, Chiefs. They've lost to the Falcons twice, Baltimore. But earlier, they were able to beat Philly. They're able to beat Detroit. They're able to beat Washington. Their strength of victory is like the highest in the league, meaning the teams that they've beaten have good records other than the Saints. What I look at is bye week, catch your breath. Maybe Mike Evans gets a little healthier. Maybe you get somebody back in your secondary or something. And then you're going to go Giants, Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 games where you're disappointed if you don't win 6. And they're not going to win all of them. Maybe they only win 5. But if you win 5, you get 9 wins. That's what I think they're going to be.
Arizona 6-4. They were 2-4. They've won 4 in a row. Wins against the Chargers. I think the Dolphins win was a good win. They destroy the Bears and they destroy the Jets, which I think is important if you're looking at like, different teams. Like, do you have any just dominant Sundays on your resume? For a team that you're really trying to project being dangerous in the playoffs, like I need to see a couple of those. They put them together back weeks. If you're just from a statistical standpoint, no one's going to read their numbers in the resume and go, yeah, this defense is really, really good. But I'll tell you, McBride at tight end, he's their leading receiver right now. He's only a couple years out of Colorado State. This guy has turned into a beast. And I think is going to end up at like over 1,000 yards this year. Every single Sunday I'm watching McBride. And I'm not saying like we have to say he's now up there with those other dudes, but he's kind of playing that way. He's become a real game changer for them on top of Harrison, who just apparently is going to catch a touchdown like every other week for them as a rookie receiver.
Yeah, they were kind of my sleeper team coming into the week because I felt like Kyler Murray's stock had dropped so far, like way below what he actually was, right? He had the homework clause. Everybody laughed at him. And then he got hurt. So he just kind of disappeared. And the thinking, he played last year, like we forget. He kind of got his toe back in the water a little bit the last half of the season. I thought that was a situation where either Kyler Murray or Trevor Lawrence was going to have a resurgence this year. Not both, but one of them was going to. And I think Kyler is having that. And I think they have a little bit of a formula. They're going to run the ball and they're going to be pretty physical. And they have like you said, their defense isn't there yet, but they hit on defense. They play aggressively. Budda Baker flies around. They will tag you. And then they have a quarterback who can pull the rabbit out of his hat. So that combination of we're committed to running the ball, we'll hit you, and hopefully they made a trade deadline move to try to help their pass rush. I don't know if it'll do it, but they're 15th in defense, EPA per play during their last 6 games. So 24th on the season. Before that, probably last year in the lower. So they've been better during this run. They've got a little something going. You have to have some on-field results, though, to harness this. And I remember, and I wrote about this in my column today, like like they're a little bit like Detroit was with Dan Campbell to me early on, where you made fun of Gannon, you made fun of Campbell, and they lost a bunch of games, but you felt they were plucky, like they were kind of plucky. They didn't even get their win total last year, but you felt like they exceeded expectations a little bit, but they just didn't have the results. And then in the second year, it starts to turn, and it's dicey. Like they're winning games by 2 points, 1 point. I think they've got 2 1-point wins and a 2-point win. I mean, those are easy losses that could go the other way, but they got them, and you start to get a little confidence, And now you play a couple bad teams, Chicago, Jets. You're now able to beat the bad teams, and they've done it consistently. So if you can beat the bad teams, it doesn't mean you're a great team, but you're going to win. You're going to be out of that 4 or 5 win mode, right? You're going to win maybe closer to half your games or around there.
Would you have thought the Broncos were good if they had won yesterday?
Well, I was really, yes, I was really looking at them. I don't know about how good, but like I was thinking maybe I still do, just need to do some analysis on them, because I think so much of the Denver story nationally has been the demise of Russell Wilson, Peyton's handling of that. And then you sort of go, okay, they drafted Bo Nix. He hasn't been that overly impressive, at least early in the year. It's been a little better lately. And I think a lot of people just sort of held off, kind of waiting to see, are they really going to win any games? And then they had their hearts ripped out yesterday. They really should have won the game. And they didn't win the game. And so they didn't get to harness it like the Cardinals have. And I don't know that it's a damaging death blow, but it was a tough one for them. I think they could have claimed some corner turning a little bit more had they won that. But I think they're not bad. I put them in that category. They're not a bad team.
If we do this exercise and say, all right, how many teams would you pick to beat Kansas City today? The Mahomes part of it maybe still ends up like leaving. I think I still have the list at 0. There's teams I think that are better than them. I think Detroit's better than them. I think Baltimore's better than them. Maybe Buffalo. I don't know. Maybe.
Buffalo might beat them this week.
I'd like to see just a clean, like 3 or 4 week Green Bay stretch. Philadelphia, I think, is back in this conversation. We're going to get to Philadelphia here in a second. But I guess I'm asking you, how many teams you think are better than them? Because I think it's a different answer than how many teams would you actually pick right now to beat Mahomes?
Yeah. And so I think you can't honestly separate those two things. I think if you think they're going to win the game every time they play a team, then they have to be the best team. They've won. Are they 14 in a row now? 15? Is it 15? Might be 15 in a row, counting playoffs.
Yeah.
So, yesterday was feels fluky to win on a special teams play. But if I'm going to pick them to win every game against whoever they play in a given week, then how can I say that they're not the best team? That's part of being the team, right? You win the game when you play.
Yeah, it sounds pretty simple. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes you look at the power ranking and all that kind of stuff. By the way, it is 15 in a row. The last 2 of the regular season, 4 in the playoffs, and 9.
So, here's the thing about them. They're a good defense, but they're not a bunch of turnovers and flashy and anything like that. They're in the bottom. They're in the bottom of turnovers for the last 3 years. Bottom 5-6 teams. So, but they're just really solid defensively, right? They're good. Offensively, not explosive plays, but they can go on a 15-play drive whenever they need to. That's really impossible to do. And when they get Pacheco back too, when their running game, they're just a team that can grind you out. And then Mahomes can still do the incredible thing. And I think DeAndre Hopkins will lead them in touchdown catches this year. I think that'll be a good thing for them. I can't pick someone to beat them.
Okay. What about Philly? Not just again outside of the Kansas City thing, but this is a roller coaster. And I don't know who said it the other day, but it was like the local fans still hate him, and I think the rest of us all think they're pretty good.
It's so funny.
Hate him is strong, but you get my point.
Well, I mean, okay, the win streak, Cleveland, they almost lost the game, it felt like. So you're like, all right, we're not giving them a ton of credit for that. Okay, you beat the Giants. Impressive win over the Bengals, beat them by 20. Love that. But then Jacksonville and Dallas are really nobodies, right? So I think what we're going to see is this next 3-week stretch of home Washington, at Rams, at Ravens, will really give the Eagles a chance to show what they are. And I think if they win 2 of the next 3, then, they are who their fans would hope they are, but fear they're not. And if they lose 2 of the next 3, they kind of have a good record, and yet, maybe some of those concerns will be valid. I just feel like they have improved, and some of that stuff's died down. A lot of noise around the team with the coaching staff and all of that. It feels like it's calmed down. We'll see. Washington, Rams, Ravens, a lot of stuff can happen.
So you still think they're the second best team in the NFC? Because that's what their seed is today.
Yeah, let me just look at the teams. It helps me to visually see them. Yeah, yes.
You're off Minnesota?
Yeah, I would put Minnesota a notch below that, because I don't think Sam Darnold's that good. I mean, I think he's done a nice job and a nice story, but I think they're very super defense reliant. Whereas I feel like the Eagles are probably just a little bit more balanced as a team. Yeah, I would put Philly second, because I think Washington's also come back to. It's only 1 game lost, but we'll get into that too with where Jayden Daniels is at. I think they're not quite firing like they were. So maybe Philly right in there. Keep our eye on San Francisco.
Okay, before we get to, I guess we could just do it here. Let's start with the Russell Wilson side of things, because you are kind of if there was a special on Nat Geo about Russell Wilson, they'd be like, we got to get Sando. And you would sit there in your chair and they would cut back to you all these different times to give us the full scope of the Russell Wilson thing. It was a rough start, that first game, but he righted himself within the game. I would need to see multiple weeks of this, but I think the one thing that's clear is there's a deep shot trust because of the talent at receiver, whether it's, I think, Pickens getting more looks and then Williams being there a week. We all like Mike Williams. We all know how talented he is. It's just his availability issues, but they plug him in. I think that makes it look a little bit different, where they can win a shootout against a Washington team. And granted, this score of this game was a little fluky because some of the deep turnover stuff that happened. But early returns and maybe just on the deep ball opportunities alone, it feels like it's adding something else that Fields wasn't as consistent with.
Oh, no doubt. I think it's really refreshing. I think the Russell Wilson story got so tiresome and just, it was all about him and his personality and all this stuff. Hey, it's framed up just right in Pittsburgh because he's a $1.2 million player. It's not all about him. He's part of the team. And so I think it's just been a great change for his career. And he's got a good defense again. He's got a physical runner. And the deep ball doesn't leave you, right? I mean, I think you could find a lot of older quarterbacks who could still throw the deep ball better than they could do some other things. I don't know why some of these teams, it feels like they, in fact, I was talking to someone last night. I was like, are they going to play man coverage on these deep balls all forever on Russell Wilson? Right? I mean, because it's just like, he's going to drop it in the bucket. Like, you want to give him that? He can throw the ball down the field in a place where the defense probably won't get it. And if you have a good receiver who can go get it, you might get a touchdown. So it's a great setup. I think he has the components around him with the defense, a team that wants to run it, to be able to hit some of those shots. And he hasn't been blowing the games, right? He hasn't done anything terrible, right? It's been manageable for him. And I do think he's definitely a better passer and an overall quarterback than Justin Fields. Even if he doesn't have that gear to go running like he used to, he can function in this type of a manner.
On the other side, let's talk about Jayden, because you shared some splits on your Athletic piece this morning. Well, it's showing you a difference here. I just don't know how alarming they are this early on.
Well, okay, so if we go back to what our concern was for Jayden Daniels coming in the year was, hey, pretty slight frame. He got blown up a lot, took big hits in college. And then coming in this year, he took some hits, but it didn't seem to be as damaging. Well, then Baltimore played him pretty physical. And when that happened, I was talking to some coaches in the league and they were like, hey, did you see that? You see what Baltimore did to him? And I was like, well, I mean, it was okay. That if teams start doing this,
they didn't have you convinced.
Well, I mean, I watched the game. I didn't watch it from all 7 angles or anything, but I okay. And then the next week, Carolina, he had the injury, which again didn't look like something that would necessarily always injure you. But clearly, we've seen a big shift in him to where completion percentage in the first 5 games, 77% down to 60. He's lost a yard per attempt on that. And then the rushing usage, I mean, is in half. He had 52 rushes, counting scrambles in the first 5 games. He has 25 since then. He had 4 rushing touchdowns in the first 5 games, none since then. So something's changed. And if the concerns we had coming into the season were durability over a course of a whole year, given frame and playing style, and Cliff Kingsbury over second halves of seasons, which we saw be an issue for him in the past, either through scheme or through quarterback attrition, right? You have a quarterback who's running in a college type style of on offense. Right now, at this point, we're more concerned about those things than we were a month ago. And that's all I'm saying is, they got to playing some tough defenses in here, Pittsburgh, right? What's it going to look like?
Do you think it changes like who he is, or can he just live as a passer?
Oh, I think he could probably live as. I think he's a good passer. Yeah, I think he has a good feel for the position. But I think that other component of it is an X factor that's not going to go away forever. I think it's been muted and diminished for whatever reason. The injury could possibly be it. The ribs is a terrible thing to play through, right? He could really be hurting and taking a shot before the game and that type of stuff. If you have ribs, you don't want to cough, let alone do all the rotational mechanics and things that you have to do in football and take a hit. So totally understandable. Maybe that heals up and then he's kind of fine and, has some bumps and bruises that he can play through, but still be explosive. I think that remains to be seen.
Okay, so that's been the good story for a top pick. Let's talk about the bad story, Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
This is ugly. I don't know that any of it's been as ugly as it was yesterday because New England's terrible. I mean, look, the Cardinals smash them, but they're not the Pats. The Commanders' loss was a really fluky thing. You go back, and I was talking about this at the beginning. Like, well, the Titans, Will Levis kind of threw that one away. The Panthers were terrible. They did beat the Rams in there. The Jags are still a bad football team. But now it's the combination of like how bad it all is with the Bears. So let's start there because I have a follow-up within some of the stuff that you've already talked about with how bad this is. I just can't imagine they're going to run this back with Caleb and the resources you put into a number 1 pick.
You mean run it back next season with the same group or run it back?
Flus.
Yeah.
I'm not even talking about offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that stuff will take care of itself because they have, I believe, their entire NFC North schedule is up ahead, plus the 49ers. So it'll take care of itself.
Have you looked at it, by the way? Did you look at the strength of schedule?
I didn't do the number, but I looked at it and it was
look at the number.
Wrote it in my column. It's what is it?
If you go to the remaining
Tankathon
strength of schedule,
or where do you get it?
Go to Tankathon. This is good because the audience already knows what it is because I
should have put this in the freaking column. I've listed
Did you see
the teams. Okay, I'm looking right now. 708. Sorry, Eberflus and those guys over there.
Right.
Their easiest opponent is Seattle, who on any given day is Jekyll and Hyde. They put up 40 first downs on Detroit one week. That's your easiest game.
Yeah. So 708.
And the next team's 587, Cleveland. Oh my gosh. And see, this is exactly what I was saying. Tampa's 328 at the other end. So Tampa's going to have a bunch of wins. Chicago is like, hey, if Chicago stays the course, it'll be because those guys earned it, right? They will have to turn it around against good teams. They'll earn it. But this decision will make itself over the remaining games. And it looks terrible. The 708, it looks horrific for them. One of the interesting components of this that I didn't get in my column, but I talked about with my editor beforehand, is we don't always do a good job, just we meaning public or media, whatever, of predicting what are good and bad situations for these quarterbacks. Last year, everyone was like, oh my gosh, CJ Stroud is doomed. He's going to the Texans. This organization's crap. And then, like, as the year goes on, you're like, well, they're pretty good at receiver. The offensive line was better than we expected. Obviously, that's an issue this year. They got a runner, and then at the end of the year, you're like, oh, man, Bryce Young had the worst situation in history. Well, this year I couldn't turn on any
it was even worse
or nothing. People are like, you know, and people are like, oh, this is the best environment for any number one pick ever. And, I didn't write a column saying it wasn't, but I was skeptical of that. I mean, says who? What have they won? The offensive line's good because the GM likes it. I mean, that was another component of my column was like, yes, this is the sky falling here. The bottom's fallen out. There's been some real crises the last few weeks that makes it even seem worse. But is 4 and 5 way worse than what they should have been going into the year? Or does it just look bad because Caleb's taken 38 sacks and that's the part of it that is most concerning? I think it's the aesthetic of it and just the 38 sacks and not having an answer on offense while these other, Jayden Daniels and even though I don't think Drake May's doing anything, he's at least had some flashes and won a game here recently,
Yeah, it's also because it's going up against Drake May. It's then losing to the number 2 pick the way they did. So there's some, if you were writing a season worth of episodes for some drama, these would be the moments where it kept getting tougher and tougher and tougher. But with that remaining schedule, I think I'm just shocked how rarely I feel like they're finding some answers. I think the first play that came out in the second half, they roll out Caleb, they brought Rome across the formation, and it was like, oh, hey, did it take the entire halftime to come up with this one play that you knew would work on one side? And by the way, if it was covered, that was the only option they were going to have on the play on top of everything else. I think Caleb could do a better job getting rid of the football on some of those. I think there's some Russell Wilson-ish, I should have said it differently, Russell Wilson-ish sacks to Caleb's game where if you weren't watching the Seahawks, you're like, man, I get Russell Wilson's point. Like, he's upset about the protection and all that stuff. Like, man, half of those sacks are on him.
There's some of that. There's definitely some of that, but that was to be expected, right? That's what everybody said coming into the year. He was going to be a big play merchant, right? Looking for the home run. He was going to hold the ball too long, and they were going to possibly have, 3 and outs and some inefficiency as part of their game because of how he was conditioned to try to play. And that's kind of what's happened. And they haven't been able to lead him out of that or coach him out of it or block him out of it, right? To me, this is a total failure of the offensive line is bad. When they said it was good. So that's not Caleb Williams' fault. That's not even necessarily Shane Waldron's fault. That's a structural thing. Then you get a second chance to hire an OC and you interview a bunch of guys. And by the way, your first guy you hired has already been refired. Okay. They hired Luke Getsy. He's been refired. And then their second one, Waldron, had some decent things in Seattle, but that hasn't gone well. He hasn't had the answers. So that's on the offensive coordinators and on the head coach who hires the offensive coordinators, right? You're definitely 0 for 1 and maybe 0 for 2 if he's going to make a change, which it sounded like he might. So that's a problem. And then you throw in Caleb's culpability with some of that too, and just playing style. I do love the way Caleb handles himself. I love at the podium. He's the one guy who seems like when I listen to him talk, I feel like he gets it. And that's been impressive by him. I don't think it's too big for him, but all the other stuff around him's got to probably be different.
So did you have that in your piece? I think I may have lost it in just all the stuff that I was reading this morning, but Pole's talking about the offensive line. He was like, I can't believe like the 9th guy. Like, I can't believe the last guy we had to let go. And then here we are. And it's just a good reminder of, like you had said, like we thought the O-line was good. Why? Because they told us it was.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There in that quote, which there's a YouTube of it, it's on like the Bears YouTube or something. It was like, hey, and we cut this one guy and he was even like, man, that's the best offensive line room I've ever been a part of. It was like, it was over the top. It was really over the top. So, but I don't remember people in the league going, hey, that offensive line, look out. No one ever said that. It was always sort of like coming out of there. And, this is where I think media becomes complicit in going with the narratives that everyone sort of wants to have happen. And I see it with Drake May right now. Oh, Drake May's capturing this team, all of that. Just relax. Wait, they beat the freaking Bears. They had like 4 field goal drives and a 2-yard touchdown pass. He is not taking the league by storm, or just let him play, right? Let it play out a little bit. And I think sometimes when you get the generational talent and they say the line's good and everybody like Keenan Allen, you still got to let it play out.
I'm with you on the Drake May thing too. Like, it's fine. It's okay. Like, it's not a disaster or anything, but it's also not all of the other things that I've been hearing. Cause I'm just like, how did like, he completed 7 passes in this one game. Then I remember somebody telling me like, it was different.
Oh, we're seeing flashes. It's different. Yeah. That's just narrative BS. Don't fall for it. You know,
I actually have another Bears follow-up because I thought in your piece it was really interesting. Kevin Warren, who we know worked with the Big Ten, comes in, president of the team, the whole thing. It seemed to be adamant. There's a feeling around the NFL that if they do make the change from Eberflus, that they wouldn't want to hire somebody that's like the headliner. And that's the kind of stuff where I hear, like, I remember it's happened with Dallas forever with Jerry Jones because of what happened in the past. It's like, okay, so he brings in Jimmy, brings in Switzer, but then he went to Parcells, and then it's like, all right, so it's only Campos and Garrett's from now on because Jerry doesn't like sharing the spotlight. So I've heard that forever. I guess I can't just, as like a pragmatist, understand why anyone that would be this committed to the success of the thing that they're supposed to be in charge of would be like, I'd like to get a good coach in here, but I don't want him to be super like popular, and then it takes away from the attention of me. So I'm going to do a worse job. I'm going to hire somebody who's not as good, that prevents me from maybe being, I guess you have the quote in there. All these people seem to hammer this over and over again. I just have a hard time believing competitive people could actually do this at times.
Well, I don't think they necessarily think they're getting a worse coach, and they may not be. There's plenty of coaches that come in that don't fit the Jim Harbaugh role who are good coaches. But nobody usually hires somebody who significantly impinges on their own role or power, right? In any job, right? So some of these team presidents are just kind of business guys in the background. They're not really part of the operation. They're not really out front talking about it. And then there's some guys who are out front. You know, you can go on the Bears website, read a day in a life with Kevin Warren. The limo picks him up at this time, and write all of that type of stuff. You know, and then shoulder to shoulder with polls and kind of, you know, involved in all this stuff going on. So the people in the league look at that and go, okay, that's probably less compatible with, you know, bringing in a coach who's going to, like you said, be more of a headliner or push aside the input from somebody like that, right? So that's just, you have to look at in every building. They're all different. And Jerry Jones is an extreme example of that. He really emphasizes the business part, and he wants to himself talk every week after the game. Kevin Warren isn't doing that. Right. He's not out there talking about the team, but he's down on the sideline taking notes, you know, last season. And he's, you know, having more input on the football operation than he would if Jim Harbaugh was the coach there. Right. It might not be like that. His role might not be the same.
So you buy it then, because the way you lay it out there, because Jones is different, it's still his team.
Jones is
it's
different.
Not Kevin Warren's team. So you would say like Warren or someone in his role would be wary of, maybe it's the Chip Kelly
naturally
thing,
lead.
like Chip Kelly, which, I mean, Howie didn't lose his gig, but there was clearly like a disconnect between the Philadelphia power structure there when Chip was there, right? And then it
absolutely,
didn't work out.
he did get displaced a little bit. I mean, he was still there. I think then his office change of where it was or whatever, things like that. And then he, you know, had enough equity with the owner to step back into that role, and you know, it's gone pretty well for them. So. Look, we need to see how it plays out there. This isn't fact, right? This is analysis of the situation. We'll see what they do. Maybe they surprise us and go in a different direction, but that's not the expectation just based on people, you know, from afar, from other teams who look at it. And you have to take into account those people's perspectives too. You know, they have their own biases as well. So, you know, I think it's something interesting to keep in mind. We don't just take it to the bank as fact, because they could do whatever, they could do something different. Depends who the candidate is too, right? Maybe there's somebody who's a big coach that Kevin Warren actually really likes or has a relationship with, right? Those are the types of things you just don't know.
Yeah, I guess I couldn't imagine like, okay, so this didn't work out. You spent like, how long do you think you get to be team president? You know, wouldn't you rather be team president of the team, even if it meant that coach was a headliner enough to have a little bit more direct line to ownership? And I understand the ownership thing with the Bears is about as challenging as it gets too. But
think of it this way. Where was Bill Belichick rumored to go last offseason?
Atlanta.
Why is it perceived that he didn't go there?
Because he wanted full control, and everybody that already had control in there told Arthur Blank, don't bring him in here because he's going to want total control, which basically was going to undermine what they were already doing.
Right. It was perceived to be because of their Kevin Warren, right? Rich McKay.
Yeah.
That's what it was perceived to be. So,
but I tell you right now, yeah. I would hire Belichick to be my coach. I'd be like, you're never doing personnel after your run.
Hey, he might go to a different team.
Okay. Well, he didn't. He didn't, though, did he?
No. We'll see.
Anybody, look, I have to separate the two things. I mean, you sit there and you watch these clips and everything, and like, I'll watch a clip of him breaking something down, and then I may disagree. Like, do you realize what you just did? Like, you disagreed with Bill Belichick about a football thing that happened, about his thoughts on like who this player would be.
I love that.
All right.
Yeah.
And then I go, what are you doing? And then I think like, but God, like he was the guy in charge of putting together what became at one point, I think, like the least exciting roster in the entire league. But we've been over the history.
They do things that you scratch your head at, but they also have way more information. So there's things they know that, we don't know.
Imagine we're seeing a different game. Yeah. Imagine we're seeing a different game than Bill. And he's great on TV. He's great with those breakdowns. And, I'm lucky enough to, be friends with somebody that works with him. And he just tells me like all the time, it's like a really cool relationship and getting to know him. So anyway, thank you for letting us to get to know you for about 36 minutes today. You can check out Mike Sando's must-read Pick 6 column every Monday morning. It is essential for me every week of the show, and it should be essential reading for NFL fans as well on The Athletic. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
The email address, lifeadvicerr@gmail.com. We've got Kyle, we've got Steve, maybe just a sprinkle of Wargon. Made it back from Baton Rouge, changed up the plan, something I haven't done, and that is I got the hell out of there early Sunday morning. Now, when the alarm went off, could I have used a couple more hours of shut-eye? Absolutely. But there's something to be said of just attacking the day and getting out of there, and then you end up being rewarded for it later on. I think the epiphany was last year. I don't know if it was post Bama LSU, maybe post Ole Miss LSU. Also both losses. I think it was Bama. I think it was in Tuscaloosa, and I had to go to a strip mall for dinner on Sunday night. And I was sitting at the strip mall bar of a place that I'm not going to name. And I was like, I guess this is my only option. I'll eat here. And then I was back in my hotel room taking notes after taking notes all day. And then my stomach turned. It was pretty bad. And then I got up Monday, and I was still in Tuscaloosa. And we taped later on the Eastern time zone, Central time zone stuff. And then I'm at the airport at like 3 or 4. And then I get back to LA, and like I miss all the NBA stuff, and it's kind of shot. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't do it this way anymore, because I don't want to be at a casino in Baton Rouge on a Monday afternoon by myself when all my buddies are gone after a big weekend. So we changed it up, got out of there, despite the loss. And boy, was it a loss. It's the worst one I've ever seen there. I'm 1-7 when I go to the game in Baton Rouge. Again, I'm going up against Alabama here, so it's not like, I'm just picking Louisiana Lafayette. But Chris Long enjoyed it. It was his first time, but he said something really smart. Place is wild. We're on the sideline. Bama's got the football, and they convert a couple third downs, score, and it's never the same the rest of the game. It's just that whole thing that builds and builds over the 3 hours that night. LSU's in the game, or they're winning the game, or whatever. Apparently the Ole Miss game's like one of the all-timers. I'd like to think that 22 was up there as well. But luckily, when LSU loses, they don't lose the Saturday night. They're just like, we're not doing this. So made it over to walk-ons. And then golf carts from walk-ons to Fred's, kind of a baller move, opened up the gates. Fred's, shout out to Mark and everyone at Fred's for taking care of everybody. And then a staff shirt for your boy Chris Long. And yeah, another Baton Rouge trip in the books, and how much I love Brandon, Todd, and the whole deal. You've heard me talk about it before. Got a little Paul Skeens FaceTime.
Oh.
Yeah, up in the
Livy
suite.
Dunn?
Yep.
Ooh. Say hi.
I played cool for a little while, and then
Paul or Livy?
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think Paul found me a little more interesting than Livy did, which is totally
you guys might have hit
fair.
it off.
Yeah, well, he had a buddy that was like asking me for advice like during the game, and I was like trying to be like really sincere about it, and then it was kind of going on for a little while, and then I was like, I got to start watching some of the game, man. So don't feel like it's just you guys. Don't feel like it's just you guys. And then as things, I think the most challenging moment was when LSU was theoretically still in the game. Brooks Nader got up in front of all of us, and she was on the outside of the suite, and then I was on the inside, and we were behind the glass, and I kind of couldn't see what was going on, but it was also Brooks Nader, and I just kind of was like, this is sort of a big third down. But she couldn't hear me, and then some of the guys were like, to be fair, it is a big third down. But she was really nice. She was sweet. Everybody's nice down there, man.
The amount of people who would tell Brooks Nader, actually, could you just step aside here? I'm missing something. Most dudes would be like, how do I get in that position? You're like, actually, could you move?
I was like, what are they? What's the formation here? I'm like, oh, I can't. What's going on the left side? So no, she was really nice. Totally. I mean, her whole family's LSU royalty anyway. So yeah, that's about it. That's the only thing I have. But the fact that I'm like raring to go, and I'm back in my home, and I'm waking up on a Monday, that might be the move now. It might be just, hey, get to the airport as soon as you can. And I got to watch all the games on YouTube TV on the flight. The internet worked, so it was fine. Yeah, worked out great.
How are you one of those guys? Because I feel like you brought Chris, and there's a lot of expectations about LSU. She's like, when you watch a movie with somebody that you love, like I used to do this with Lord of the Rings with my now wife, and it's like, oh yeah, you see how awesome this is, and you want her to love it. And
did you feel that bathroom? And she's like, you don't need to pause it. And I'm like, I want
to get that call back? Did you get that call back? Yeah,
right.
Yeah. He was an elf. Was there like pressure? Did you you wanted to make sure Chris was having a good time, right? I'm sure you're talking this thing up, and it's like, is it going to live up to the expectations? Because I mean, I went there. What was that? 2016. We talked about this last night, and it was like a horrible game. It was just like a 10. It was Jalen Hurts. It was 10-0. LSU could not score. They could not move the ball. But I still had it was still one of the top 5 sports experiences I've ever had. But I don't know if there's pressure on you as a host, as the LSU guy when you bring a guest there.
I totally get what you're saying, and I definitely have moments where when I brought friends, I'll turn to them to kind of go, "Do you get it?"
Elbow nudge,
yeah. And I did it, I think, once with Chris, but then it was over. I mean, credit to Bama, they convert a couple times in that first drive, and they take him out of it, and then there's still 2 other moments in the game prior to the Nussmeier fumble where you're like, well, maybe if this were to happen, and then after the fumble, you're like, all right, they get the ball, they come out, they're talented enough on offense, all these things, and they throw us a pick in the end zone. You're like, all right, this is over. So to not get to experience a close game, fourth quarter wildness, the crowd finding energy and finding it's just so nasty and hostile in the beginning. But it was that at the very beginning of the game. So at least so that's when I kind of turned to him, and he was like, yeah, this is not. Yeah. But then it just wasn't. I mean, it was only this 10-minute window where you got to experience it, and then it was just over. There was nothing. And he had said, he goes, if you score as the road team in a place like this on that first possession, it can change everything in the game. Yeah. It also helps when you just gash a defense the entire time and your quarterback turns it over in 2 spots where you're trying to get momentum back. So yeah, you're right. I think I've had that moment with if I was going to watch Inception with somebody for the first time, I'd probably say do you even understand that they're dreaming right now? But it's another layer of dreams. I think that's very observant of you, Ceruti, but most of the time LSU kind of delivers on its own. It doesn't really need a hostess to check in on you. I guess we just get to the emails now, right? I don't think there's anything else. Down a belt, though.
Done a belt?
Belt.
Oh,
Yeah.
that sucks. I lost a belt at a wedding a couple months ago, and I just cannot find a similar one, and I hate the one that I bought.
Belt's in the hotel room, or we don't know where it is?
Oh, no. Chris borrowed it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So,
where it is. Yeah.
One follow-up.
Well, I mean, it's gone. You think he's going to mail? You think a man is going to mail another man his belt?
you're right.
I don't know. I think some men I would. I know the importance of a good belt. That thing was like a decade old, and I really do miss that thing. So I don't know. Maybe worth an ask.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Maybe I'm.
Well, this
is the trivia thing all over again. All right.
No, I actually started pre-reading a life advice email as you were doing that, and so I was just like, all right, I'm ready to go. It had literally nothing to do with my opposition or support of what you said.
Fair.
Yeah, so we're good. We're still good. Dudes are checking in constantly. But yeah, it was not a great game. It was not a great game, but it was just I love being down there. I love being able to go down there. So all right.
Isn't your Warriors record bad too, right?
My Warriors record is like impossible. I'm 0-3 for finals games. I've gone to 3 Warriors games in the NBA finals, and they've lost all 3 of them, I think. Yeah. And I had tickets to the crazy Steph Curry game in Boston in 22. And because I went to the one they lost, I wanted to try to get my dad into the building. And then my brother took the other ticket. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do the right thing here and let them go do it together. And then it's like one of the all-time Steph things. And I was like, man, normally I can just be like, hey, whatever. I get to go to a lot of stuff. Like things come around. That one I was like, probably should have kept one of those tickets and told your brother to beat it. But I did not.
You're a stand-up guy. There you go.
Yeah, I'm the best.
My utility iron. No, it's fine.
How you hitting that thing?
Good, loving it, man. Loving it.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I checked everything that I gave you to see what it was worth on TaylorMade's trade-in site.
Don't fully regret it, but
I was like, wait, I was like, they have a trade-in program? Like, oh man. I was like, that's all right. All right. The Denver Live Pod photographer checked in again. He didn't think we would follow up. He would like, if this is a no, I probably just no one's going to respond to anything. No, I guess we'll just play it out for the audience. Heard the pod, appreciate the conversation that you didn't make fun of my email. We didn't. I mean, his avatar is black and white, so I'm taking this guy seriously. It makes sense that it's not up to Russillo. If Bill wants a photographer, still happy to cover the event, but I don't know how to email Bill. There you go.
Yeah, it's going to be the end of that road right there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. Cannot help.
Even I had to learn about the soft nose from Bill, like the Bill soft no. Like when I first started like working with Bill, Ringer, and then ultimately Spotify 5+ years ago, I would have all of these people ask me favors from Bill, and like one of them, I thought was
even the ones
cool.
that you think are like important enough, and you're like, oh, he might respect this one.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean,
you vetted them carefully, and still no good.
I would know like, oh, there's no point even bringing that up. Yeah. And then it was, these are all no's. And then I realized the guys asked about stuff every single day. So then I was like, this is not something to venture into anymore. Because at first you're like, I don't think I got a no. I was like, no, that's a no. That was a no. And then you learn. All right. So, I can't help you there. Also, taking photos of Kyle in Denver sounds hilarious, but like you guys said, not exactly what I was hoping for. If I shot the event, I'd be happy to add an hour or so with Kyle pre-show to get some family calendar-worthy photos. Let me know if you can help. If not, I'll just assume not getting an email back is a no thanks, which is fine. Yeah. So it sounds like Kyle.
Soft no.
Yeah, it sounds.
This is a Bill no. Yeah.
Right, but I mean,
no to everybody. No to me. No to you. It's all good. Normalize. Yeah, no. I'm on that corner. Normalize no. That's fine.
What I don't like is, here's what I'll say that I do like is that if it turned into just a Kyle photo shoot and then he wasn't allowed to shoot the live event, he's telling us a pass, and I love that transparency.
Yeah.
This one I think is fake. Like, do I read it? I don't know.
I would say yeah.
All right. I lift a whole bunch. Hope you're impressed. Bad start. 42, couple friends. He uses 2 names here that I'm not even going to use. In their late 20s. She's kind of a third daughter from my wife and me as she lived with us and our 2 much younger daughters when she was a teenager during a difficult time in her life with a relationship I thought I'd be able to say anything to her without fear. Fast forward a few years, and they've had their first child a couple years ago after much difficulty and several complications. We've lived several hours apart, and our communication is affected by this. That being said, we did not find out until after the birth of their first amazing child some weird details. First, the details of which we were aware. They were nervous about hospitals due to the nature of their previous difficulties. We were aware they were going to have a home birth. We were concerned about the logistics because they live in a very small home. They assured us it would be fine. Now, what caught us by surprise, only after the birth of their amazing daughter did we find out where the home birth occurred. They rented out an Airbnb.
Oh, man.
They decided to have their child in someone else's house. We asked if they told the owner their intention when booking, and they said, quote, "No, we'll have it all cleaned up." I almost emailed you after this to ask if I should say the extent of my disgust, but I decided it's not worth it. It seems now I only delay the inevitable demand. I respond with my opinion. They're now pregnant again and past the probable point of risk. Now for my question, is it worthwhile to voice my opinion disgust for their first birthing experience? My purpose in doing so should be to avoid what I believe to be a disgusting use of property rentals, knowing full well the full ranges of demented uses for which these properties are used. I've even heard tell of a friend borrowing his friend's place for an adulterous tryst. So why would you
matters unless she's trying to visit you near the due date? Other than that, I think you're fine. You'd be like, you know what? I got something to say. But other than that, I thought, mind your business.
Yeah. This feels like one of those. That's weird. Anyway, moving on with my day.
She's like, yeah, we're thinking about stopping by around Thanksgiving. And you're like doing the math. You're like, nope, I don't think I'm around, actually.
I don't even know why we'd be asked. I mean, unless it just falls into the standard category of I have a challenging conversation like waiting here for me. I got to be honest with you, like renting an Airbnb to do something, if that were even true. That's so weird that I don't think I would just go, I'm never talking to you about this.
Right. Well, I do feel like there's also kind of a rule, like, I don't think you mess with other people's birthing plans. You know, I remember when we were in the hospital and, you know, we were talking like to the nurses there, and there's like, they have some like just crazy stories of like people who bring in like full binders of how they want their birth to go. And they're very specific. We had no plan. We're just like, hey, can we just like have a safe baby and go home? And that's great. But you kind of can't you can't shame them for that. You can't really talk. I mean, unless you're like a really, I mean, you are a close family member. I guess that's the case. But I think this is one of those things where you just kind of let it happen. And the other thing too is, it does sound weird on the surface, like, hey, you're giving birth in some stranger's house, but their house is on Airbnb. I don't know. That's kind of what happens. Like,
is it sign away kind of what happens?
I mean, I think you sign away a lot of the like control over what happens in that house. And also, like, I've never been at a home birth. I think I know a little bit about them. I mean, it's not like there's just like fluids everywhere. You know,
you said there was only going to be 2 people in the Airbnb, so you definitely broke the agreement.
Maybe that's true.
I'm not asking you this is right. Yeah. You got to stay another night. We got to update the occupancy.
No guess after that.
I don't know. I don't think the email. I don't know. I don't think it was real, and I think it was weird enough to try to get us.
That's so weird to be not real. Like, that's such a weird.
I think
fake
it's real.
Email.
I think it's real. I think we've been burned in the past, but that's real.
Well, yeah, but I think the last line though is a reference to something else we already talked about. So I don't know. Whatever. Maybe we'll get an update on it. And you know, I don't want an update on it. Good luck with everybody.
Fair.
All right. The weakest strongman at the circus. Hey guys, love the pod. Always find life advice section super engaging. So wanted to reach out and get your take on my situation. No discernible gym stats to mention, but I'm a distance runner. Just managed to top 30 placement at the Marine Corps Ultra Marathon last month out of a field of 993. That sounds actually insanely
like
impressive.
A tough group.
Yeah,
what's the
right.
Ultra Marathon? That's the.
Is it 40 miles? Is it longer? Kyle, that's too long for you?
That's too long.
31 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles. Yeah.
We're just counting 70 miles.
No, I think those are all the different things. I don't know which one. I would assume it's a 30-mile run.
I don't know.
50-mile bike. Or maybe, I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I'm looking it up. Whatever. It sounds like it's just longer. That's good job. Good
Fair.
job. Actually, I think Ceruti was right. He was on the right path.
Start throwing numbers out there.
Yeah. Anyway, as far as athlete comp, have to go with Tony Romo. Little pedigree to speak of in terms of the background and underlying reason of being as successful as I am outside of hard work, coupled with being in the right places at the right times with the right people around me. I always thought his career embodied fortuitous circumstances, and I look at my situation quite similarly. I'm 37, married, no kids, 2 dogs, and like Tony, am incredibly lucky to be where I am. Lots of sacrifice along the way, but despite my relative youth, will likely be in a position in the upcoming 3 to 5 years to walk away from the corporate world. I wouldn't say we're rich, but without the cost of children or any other dependents, as long as we continue with our current lifestyle, we'll be set living off investments and other assets. Thing is, what's next when that happens? All friends, family are doing the kid thing. And while my wife and I love being the fun aunt and uncle, we have no interest in having any ourselves. All right, so that's a position. We both love to travel. We live abroad, and we'll both be hitting 40 countries visited each later this year. When we envision an extended period of exploring the world, but given we'll likely have half of our lives ahead of us, we'll both be feeling a bit of aimlessness creeping in, knowing we're finding ourselves in a unique situation and quite dissimilar to those around us. The title of the email is a reference to Succession, where Connor and Tom are telling Greg he'll be in purgatory-like state, being well off but not rich. 5 million's a nightmare. 5 million's a nightmare, Greg. Yeah. I love that scene. And while I find that laughable, I'm finding myself trying to sort out what a second act will be like. I'm working 67 hours a week, and the thought of all of that free time makes me think I'll either run myself into the ground, currently doing 45 miles per week, gain 100 pounds, love to cook, or drive my wife crazy with historic anecdotes if I get even more into presidential biographies and other history books. Would love your take on reinvention and how you'd approach a reset if you were in a similar position. Well, look, you're making a very significant decision. And as somebody that doesn't have kids, I certainly think about it a lot more now. Like, what are you actually going to do? What's the plan going to be? I mean, it doesn't haunt me. It doesn't make me sad, but it's the reality of like, what's that phase going to be like? And I don't know. I don't know that you can feel it until you get a little bit older. I just don't. When like the reality of like the window going, oh, yeah, all right. So like, there's a lot of things I really like about my deal. I am constantly hearing from guys, and I don't love it, that have done the more traditional things, being like, you're my hero. I'm like, well, I'm not doing this to be anybody's hero. And I think there's times with the way things go for me that you would not like this, right? You wouldn't like any of this stuff. But you have a wife, right? You have a wife, you get along, everything's great. You love doing all this traveling thing. I don't know that there's this answer like, oh, make sure you do this or have a podcast about your travels. Like, do you have to have something?
We know that works.
Well, for some, it does. But do you need to have a thing? Because like, I think one of the funniest things about retirement is like when you're a little kid, you're like, oh, you get to retire and then just do nothing. Doing nothing would be hell for a lot of people. It'd be hell for me. Like, if I had enough money to just retire tomorrow, I probably wouldn't watch this many games and maybe I'd get out of sports, but I would constantly be like trying to figure out some other grind because I just like, what's the point of doing any of this shit without goals and even failing at some of those goals? So it sounds like you're so driven and you've worked so hard. Are you really sure that once you can walk away financially in 5 years, that it's not even about kids? Like, you may be wired in a way where you're going to need something that kind of replaces it. And that's where, again, the running thing alone shows your determination. So it sounds like not only are you a really hard worker with an incredible focus, you're actually accomplishing this shit too, on top of everything else. So you're going to need something, and it's not about replacing kids. It's probably going to be about replacing the work. And I don't know. I mean, why do you think people golf? Why do you think people join country clubs?
Yeah.
Why do you think people get into fly fishing? Like all these different things. Like, oh, I'm gonna be so into fly fishing that I'm gonna hit up the top 50 fly fishing spots, and like I'm very task oriented, and I have to get through all this stuff. Like, you may have to figure out that kind of stuff, because it seems like you're totally okay with the kid thing, where I think a lot of people, as they get older, I'm just, for younger dudes that like look up to me and stuff, I'm like, I don't know, man. You're probably not going to like it. You're going to see the dad at the beach with the 2-year-old daughter with a backward hat throwing a tennis ball back to the dad. Like, never going to do that. That's real shit, man. And you don't see it the same way at 35 you do when you're fucking 49. Anyway.
So is this guy, I mean, are you anti-work, or are you anti like buttoned up corporate world, extra words in your emails work? Like, is it something you could do for fun? Like my dad, IBM, probably 30 years at this point. He's nearing the end of his time there, and he's ready to be done with that. But he's also like, you know what? Maybe I'll just get like a part-time gig at Home Depot. I feel like I'd really love it there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't need the money. I'm good. But it's, I could see 23 hours a week or whatever 3 days a week is on a light shift. I could do that. My stepdad is a retired fire captain in Yonkers. He's like making Adirondack chairs at his leisure. That's I'm awesome. Like, maybe you could throw these in your pickup truck, bring them into town and see if anybody wants them. And he's like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I like having extra ones at the house. So like, he's got stuff that he's doing. Like, have you thought about like a business? Like, I don't know, maybe you're into like, get a good formula for soap on a rope, like some shit you could just do at home and just be like, look what I made. Like, just like a hobby that maybe you can turn into, something that you're like, oh, I'm getting a little money for this. It's not a waste of time. I personally think I could golf 2-3 times a week and be good. Maybe mixing some 9 holes and some 18. So I'm not, hurting all the time. But like, I think there's stuff that I would mix. I wouldn't just be like, well, I'm at home all the time. I hope my wife's okay with this. Like, you definitely just find your thing that you're cool with doing. And maybe that's just a place that you go 3 times a week. Even if it's work, but it's just, maybe it breaks it up a little bit. You don't mind doing the job that it is.
Yeah. I was worried about my dad when he retired, because he's just one of those guys. Like, he's up at 4:30 every morning. He had his whole day.
Senior
he's always
coffee
busy
from McDonald's, right?
He's just always doing stuff, and it was just like, okay, now you're not going to have anything to do. Now he he fixes up cars. So he's got, that certainly takes up a lot of his time now. And that's like it's always been a huge hobby of his, and he just carried that into retirement. But that's still like, there's still more hours. Like, he started he volunteers at a train.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he started volunteering at a train museum, like, which is just like classic old guy thing. But it's like, it's awesome. He loves doing it.
The oldest guy shit I've ever heard.
Yeah. He gets to see people though. Like, he
museum.
knows about the trains. Like, it's kind of awesome.
I love that he loves trains. I didn't even know that.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
He's the model train guy too. He's got like a whole setup in the basement. Like, he's
Buckle
got a lot
out
of
in the
stuff.
garage there. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could see being a train guy post 70.
It's kind of cool. Yeah.
But I
he used
move
to do
a
the
lot.
thing around the Christmas tree, and the whatever, it was the steam engine or whatever.
No,
it was
I'd go
fun. It was
full.
cool.
I'd have stuff moving gravel and lumber.
You could do that too. Yeah. Listen.
But then, if you move
one day, buddy, you'll have the time. The thing for the
I don't know, Ryan. You don't have a lot of shit
to
to move. I feel like I saw your house. I think you could find room in the truck for some train stuff, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't seen your storage unit though.
Which room could I give up train space to?
Well, if you just commit to only going to the gym and not having a gym 10 minutes away from your house and in your house, but that's a preference thing.
You're saying get rid of the squat rack and put in a train?
Well, it just depends how much you're into this train stuff. Are you trying to build an empire here or just get stronger? I don't know.
Yeah,
question.
That's true. What movie is it with Denzel where he has the train? Is that him?
He has the trains? I know when he was on a train. It's Pelham 1, 2, 3, I think, but has the trains?
Or Unstoppable.
Yeah, that's right. 2 train movies for him.
Yeah.
Chris Pine, shout out.
Good train guy.
I thought there was a movie where he had like way too many trains set up in an apartment and he had to like move, and could be thinking about somebody else though. I'm going to research this. Were you guys done answering this?
Well, no, I was just going to add, I say all that to say, it's not also about just like, what are you going to do during your day? It's the relationships, right? So, if you go to work, you talk to people all day and you interact with people. And that's like, that's social energy for a lot of people. They like that. That gives them purpose in life. If you're only around your partner all the time, you guys kind of hit on this. Like that's a little treacherous territory there, because you're not used to spending. Like it was definitely when my wife and I both started working at home. Like it was a different vibe. It's like, wow, we see each other all the time now. Like there's no escape, and it's fine, but it's definitely like an adjustment. So I think you got to get out of the house first and foremost. Like you could have the train hobby, but also like, yeah, maybe go golfing, maybe get into rock climbing. The other thing, if you do get into one of those hobby things, what are some of my favorite like social media accounts are those people that like they'll buy like just a total dump of a house and then they just the whole progress of how they fix it up, or they do it with a car, or there's some sort of like thing that they do that's really unique to them that they build and they gain this following or on the way. I don't know if you're into that, but I've always kind of wanted to do that if I had more free time. Not just for like the clicks and the likes and all that stuff, but just because it's cool. Like some people out there, it's cool to watch people do stuff. And so if you like something and you want to maybe get a following, you could potentially make some money off that, like by accident. So I think you got to get out of the house.
Lawns for free. I think those guys are great.
Yeah, those are awesome videos. I love those videos.
I watch the whole thing.
The power washers too. Anything that's like very, whatever that's called. But I agree.
Maybe time capsule. Bury one of those.
It's a long-term play, but yeah.
Maybe you could.
We buried one in fourth grade. That thing's due to crack open pretty soon, I think.
Maybe you could be the guy who does like start a lawn business, but I only do the ride along tractor. That way, you're never like you only do the fun part. And you're like, yeah, I'll mow the lawn. I'm not doing any edging and the mulch. Yep. That's not really me. I'll give you a reference, but we only play 80s Joel. You know what I mean?
Strictly 80s Joel. Yeah.
Hey man, what'd I say? 80s Joel.
Now that I'm thinking about this time capsule that we buried in fourth grade, there's no chance it didn't just get plowed when they like had to expand the school or like dig
it's not on a special map somewhere in a protected area, right?
Yeah, we just went to like the edge of the woods and like put it 3 feet in.
Oh, wow.
And then we all went back being like, man, people from space are going to see our Van Halen cassette tape. Wonder what this
sounds like
is.
A half-assed job. Usually they put them like, next to like the
pogs.
flagpole out front. They don't put them in the
middle.
Yeah,
well, we were 9, so we were pretty into it at the time. I mean, they may have buried it and picked it up like that summer. Like, all right, they're out of here. We're going to do the same thing again. This guy's been doing it to his fourth grade classes forever. By the way, the Denzel thing, it's not trained. It's a Civil War reenactment scene that it just takes up a massive, massive piece of his apartment. I think it's Denzel, but anytime I try to Google it now, it's just, I can't remember the movie. And anytime I Google anything Denzel Civil War, it's just coming back up as Glory. 1989, Matthew Broderick. People really fought. Speaking of fourth grade, people were very against Matthew Broderick having that role. Like Ferris Bueller's going to be this guy, and be like, you didn't even realize that he was actually theatrically trained. It's ridiculous. All right, that'll do it for the pod today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Ceruti, thanks to Wargon, and of course, thanks to Kyle. Check out our YouTube page. I think we have something planned this week. Do we, Ceruti?
TBD.
No. TBD. Maybe we won't. Maybe we won't do it. Maybe we'll take.
We got to get your history corner. We haven't done yours yet, so.
All right. Well, I've been prepping it for years. Please subscribe. Ryen Russillo Podcast, right on Spotify.